Okay, so the next thing I want to do with this document is check the paragraph structure. So each paragraph should basically stick to one main point or have one main feature of it. And preferably the first sentence, which is called the topic sentence, should tell me something about what the rest of the paragraph is going to address. And the last sentence should either conclude that topic or it should tell me what to expect in the next paragraph. So it's a bit like a sandwich where we have a beginning and an end with a middle in the middle. So looking at my first paragraph here, it's talking about placing endotracheal tubes. It's talked about nasotracheal intubation, and then tells me that you should switch to orotracheal tubes if you have 2 unsuccessful attempts. So I think I'm going to split this paragraph into here because this first one is now dealing with nasotracheal intubation, and then the second part here is dealing with orotracheal intubation. Now, if I left that as one paragraph, it would be fine. It's not a huge block of text that's covering 8 different topics. So some of this does boil down to personal preference. I personally tend to write shorter paragraphs because I'm conscious I'm writing for students who are reading it mostly online, and I think it's easier to manage shorter paragraphs in that environment. Then I have my table. Then I've got a section here on confirming tube placement. That's fine. Then you can see this next bit is quite a large chunk of text. I've started off here talking about securing the tube, so I've said how to do it, and then I've moved on to talk about how to give the fold a breath. So I think a natural point to start a new paragraph here is with attach, because I've switched from talking about securing the tube in this section to then talking about giving the breath in this section here. Then this part here, I'm moving on where it says the bag has a regular valve on it. I've moved on to talk about avoiding damaging the lungs by overstretching them. So I'm going to make that into a new paragraph now as well. So I've got confirming placement and giving breaths, and then ensuring you avoid barotrauma and talking about oxygen. So then I have moved on to say that the last bit here is dealing with if you don't have this equipment available, what else can you use? I'm going to make a new paragraph out of that as well. So I've moved on from valves and barotrauma to oxygen to alternatives for ventilation. So what was one big chunk of text is now broken up into several smaller paragraphs, and it's going to be easier to read. I don't want my reader to kind of get lost halfway through a paragraph. Then I've talked in this paragraph down here, I've started off by occluding the esophagus and talking about why we do that. And then I've moved on to talking about mouth to nose resuscitation. So there are 2 different topics. The first part of this paragraph is currently dealing with occluding the esophagus. The second part is talking about mouth to nose. So I'm going to split this into 2 paragraphs at that point. Again, in terms of how you lay it out, it is personal preference. Some people leave no space between them and just rely on the indents at the ends to indicate a new paragraph. I think that's a bit confusing. I prefer to put a single line between them. But again, it really is, there's an element of choice here. As long as you're consistent throughout your document, that's fine. So wherever you lay out the first paragraph, lay out the rest of the paragraphs in a similar manner throughout the document. And then you can see here, because I've made the paragraphs further up the page, further apart, I've now hopped this line here, starting do not be tempted, onto a new page. So I need to put in a page break, or another line here between this advice on the rate of breaths and avoid inflating the chest as hard as you go. So I'm going to, I'm happy with that. And then that's the last paragraph. Okay, so that's just an example of how to review your paragraphs after you've written your work and check that they're logical. Thanks.